we're going to jump in with the fun questions,
Yes.
the more geeky and nerdy ones. These ones are for the most important paper here in Colombia called El Tiempo, and it's also going to be on my YouTube channel. So
Excellent.
the first question is, actually, like, knowing how many books and stories you've created over the years, it was really hard for me to decide like where and when to start this interview, because I have like always wondered of the origin moment the Cosmere came to your mind. Like, I'm sure you've mentioned this over the years, but was it like in a flash, or was it after months and years of careful consideration? Like, how did you take those first steps in the crazy endeavor that was creating the whole Cosmere?
So the first step I can point to is being a young man reading books and wanting to tell the stories in my head of the characters that were side characters. So I would read a book by Anne McCaffrey, and there would just be somebody mentioned briefly. And I'd be like, who's that character? What's their story? And since Anne McCaffrey wasn't telling it, I would tell it in my head as I went to sleep at night. This is who this person is. And slowly that evolved when I read another author's book to be like, hey, that person I told a story about in my head, they've made it to this book too. And they're now this character behind the scenes. And then I would read another book by another author, and I would do the same thing. And that's the origin of Hoid, is this character I was telling stories about in other people's books. I still remember when I, as a young man, when I read Isaac Asimov's Foundation and his robot novels, and when he combined those two into one. And that was a very big moment for me, where I realized he had spent all this time building up these two series and then made them one. It was really cool to me. I would point to those two moments as really big moments for me. As I wanted to be a writer, I realized that I couldn't ever sell book 2 if I hadn't sold book 1. So I wrote 13 novels before I sold one. And those 13 novels included only one sequel. There were 12 new worlds, 12 new stories, 12 new books, because I realized if the publisher rejects book 1, they're not going to look at book 2. So I need a bunch of book 1s. And I didn't think it would take me 13 novels. But during those days, I really loved big epics. And I started to connect all of these different worlds I was doing very naturally by plucking this character I've been imagining and making his story in this thing that became the Cosmere. I eventually sold Elantris, which was my 6th book that I wrote. When I did, I realized I had a chance to start fresh. And I wrote the Mistborn trilogy, which were books 14, 15, and 16 of my career. And I built the Cosmere deliberately out of 14, 15, 16, using all the best ideas from all those failed books that didn't get published. I rebuilt Elantris to match this new thing. And then I released those as the first 4 books of the Cosmere. And so it was created very deliberately, but only after kind of a bunch of exploration and things like that.
How many years was that process in the making?
So I started writing my first of these 13 books when I was 19 years old. And I sold that book when I was 28. So about 9 years I wrote those 13 novels across 9 years. And so I was reading these books back when I was 15 and 16, and those ideas were starting. But the first one that I wrote that I actually finished, which is I count as book number 1, started when I was 9.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of hard work. Well, leaving for a moment all your books that are written within the Cosmere, which one of your non-Cosmere series did you have more fun writing, and which one would you like for it to have more attention? Because one of my favorite non-Cosmere books are the Skyward series, the Alcatraz series, which is so like a series few people, at least here, know. And Infinity Blade, I have like a special attachment to that one because I share my name with a character.
Oh, cool.
Isa. Yeah. So yeah. What's
So the most fun I've ever had writing was the Alcatraz series.
Hmm.
I am not surprised, though, that it is the least well-known of my books. They are really weird. They're
They
really
are.
quirky. They're really odd. They lean into humor a lot and a very weird, twisted sense of humor, where they're kind of making fun of storytelling and of the reader who's reading the story
Yeah.
while they're being done. They were written more as a writing exercise than a real intent to make something that would be a super popular series. And they're very not market friendly for that reason. But I think that a lot of people who have a weird sense of humor would really like them
Yeah.
if they tried them out. Those are the ones I had the most fun reading. I think my best, though, non-Cosmere work is Skyward.
Mm.
And it's the one that I would point people toward. I had a lot of fun with Legion as well. But Legion has the problem in that I feel like each of the stories are very different from one another. And so they make kind of a bad series in that if you like the first one, you might not like the third one because they change tones and themes very dramatically. Because these are just explorations of tone and theme for me. And so, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So this next question is gonna be a little like nerdy and geeky, and I know it can like lead to a very lengthy answer, but we have to keep it short for the time being. So one of your book's most unique aspects are the magic systems, and I'm pretty sure we have never read or never will read another one like the Mistborn one with its allomancy, feruchemy, hemolurgy. I hope I'm saying them correctly. I think they're just genius. So how was the process of creating each one of them, and did they change much between the time you thought them and the time you actually wrote about them?
Yeah, so the one I can point to starting the earliest is feruchemy, which if people haven't read the books, this is a magic system where you can store up certain attributes about yourself to access later. For instance, I thought of it first when I was in high school, and I am an insomniac. I have real trouble sleeping at night. And then during the day, I would be exhausted in class. And I'm like, this is not fair. Why can't I go to sleep now? And, why can't I be awake when I'm in school and be tired when I want to go to sleep? And I thought, what if there were like some device that could store up my desire my sleepiness, and then I could access it when I wanted to? What if I could store up moments and time so that when a moment was happening that I really, really wanted to focus on, I could have more time to focus on it. And when things were happening that I just was bored by, I could store up those moments and not have to experience them. Things like that became this magic where a person can store up their strength by being weak for a while and then access it later on, store up their wakefulness so they can, be sleepy when they want, be awake when they want, store up even brain computation speed so that later on you can think faster. These sorts of things were all came together in this magic system. And that's where a lot of my magic systems come from, is the, what if I could do this? What if this were possible? What would my life be like if I changed this one little thing? Another place that they come from is fitting the story. Allomancy is a good example of this. This is a magic system where, if you're not familiar with Mistborn, someone who's reading or watching this, it is what we call a heist story. It's about a team of thieves who are all trying to pull off something really cool in a fantasy world. And what they want to do is they want to rob the Dark Lord of this fantasy world. And I designed a magic so that it had a wide variety of powers so that each person in the team could have a different power that would accent their role in the team. And so, one power makes you stronger. One power makes you able to manipulate people's emotions. One power makes you really good at sneaking and spying and listening in. And these were all to match archetypes from a thieving crew as I put it together to just give them a magical enhancement for their team. And those are kind of the two basic ways that I come up with magic systems.
Okay. So next one is, how do you as a writer keep like centered and sane knowing you're writing one of the most ambitious fantasy series of all time, which is the Stormlight Archive. I know it's planned as a 10-book series, and the fourth one was published just last year. Do you already know what's going to happen in the next 6 books? What's the secret behind like embarking on a project this big?
So I love big epics, if you can't tell. And I knew I wanted to do one in my career that would be my central big epic. One of the issues, though, that big epics have is that it's very easy for them to get lost and wander. Some of the epics that I have loved, I'm a big fan of The Wheel of Time, if you can't tell. And Wheel of Time, one of the most common criticisms of it is that around book 7 through about book 10, it wanders off into the weeds and doesn't focus on the main story anymore. And this happened to a lesser extent to Game of Thrones as well. And that focus it's hard because you want to write this big epic about a large cast, but you also want to have a focus. The way I decided to do this was to build a story centered around 10 characters and have, even though it's a big, long, continuing story, each book focus its attention a little bit more on one of each of these characters to give me a structure. And so when I did the first 5 characters, because it's really 2 5-book arcs that together make one big arc, I built into each of them a mystery about who they are and what happened to them that wasn't fully going to get explained until we got to their story, their book, if that makes sense. So we start off book 1 with focusing on these characters, and one of them can't remember his wife's name because it's been magically excised from his brain, and you don't know why. But the further you get in the series, the more you realize the things that are surrounding this. And then we get to his book, and that's book 3, and we go into a flashback sequence, bringing up what happened that caused that. And it just gives the book its own soul. So all of those things I have planned out ahead of time.
Okay.
And I know the basic plot beats. So what I generally do, so Stormlight Archive, I planned over the course. It's very different from a lot of my other books. I spent about 15 years building the outline for Way of Kings. And I tried writing the book in 2002. Wasn't pleased with it. The one that's published is the one I wrote in 2009 after I threw that old one away and started over from scratch. But the whole idea for the Stormlight Archive is that that I wanted to have a good structure to keep me from wandering off into the weeds. And I wanted a really solid plot. That said, as you write, things change. You have a plan for a house, but you're knocking down walls and building it slightly differently. And so that outline has to be constantly refreshed, which is part of why I built it as 2 5-book arcs, because once we get to book 6, the arcs will continue, but there is there's a bit of space between book 5 and 6 in world, and book 6 allows us to refocus just a little bit in moving forward.
Okay. Now that you'd mentioned The Wheel of Time, I had like a question related to that. So I want to know how much of a challenge was taking part in writing books within universes you didn't build from scratch. You know, I'm talking about not only the last 3 books of The Wheel of Time, but of Children of the Nameless, which is a novella within the Magic the Gathering universe. So how was that experience?
So those were both very different experiences. Wheel of Time, I was asked by Robert Jordan's widow after he passed away if I would finish it. She had read Mistborn and thought I was a good match, and she called and asked me, and I was terrified. This was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I was fairly new as an author. I had published my first book in 2005, and this happened in 2007. So it was, I had loved the books since I was young, and so it was really intimidating to work on them. But at the same time, I knew that if I said no and someone else messed them up, that it would be my fault, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I realized I needed to say yes. I needed to do this myself if Robert Jordan couldn't do it. The Magic the Gathering book happened because I just love Magic the Gathering. And and they called me at one point because they know, and they said, hey, would you like to write a story for us? And I said, yes, I'll do it, as long as I can just do anything I want.
Oh, cool.
They're like, okay, sure. And so I pitched to them a story and just got some feedback from them on how to make sure it fit their continuity. And I wrote whatever I wanted and I turned it into them, and then they gave feedback on how to make it fit. They were very chill about the whole thing, very relaxed, really easy to work with. And because they just, basically they were consenting to let me write my Magic the Gathering fanfic and turn it in. And it was a side story. It's not, really deeply relevant to their main core narratives, which is where I wanted it to be, is out on the side so that it could just be something fun. With the Wheel of Time, I was writing the main narrative. I was it. And there was a lot more stress to that, but it also forced me to grow as a writer in a lot of really important ways.
Okay, so since we're running out of time, we have like 2 minutes left of our schedule. I'm gonna do like a round of rapid fire questions.
Okay,
Don't
great.
think much about them. So, of all the characters you've written, which two from different book series do you think would loathe each other instantly?
So Kelsier and Hoyd do loathe each other instantly. And so those are the ones I'd say.
And which two would immediately become best friends?
I would say that probably Lopen and Wayne would just get along smashingly.
Okay. Do you regret any characters' deaths?
No. I regret occasionally faking people out on deaths, particularly in Words of Radiance. I don't think I handled the fake out deaths as well as I could have.
Yeah, you once told me in BA, like, they ask for it, so it's what they get. Who's an author you'd like to co-write something with?
If in my dream project would be to co-author with Robert Jordan, with him being alive. So, but if that doesn't count, then I would pick probably Pat Rothfuss.
I love his books. Okay, so which character from the Cytoverse would thrive in the Final Empire and vice versa?
So I think Spencer would do just fine in the Final Empire, particularly if she could bring a gun or two along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's got energy weapons. They're going to do real well in the Mistborn world. From Mistborn, I think that maybe Tensoon would do a very good job being able to navigate all the different cultures and things that are happening in the Cytoverse.
Yeah. What's one of the most rewarding experiences that you've lived with your readers?
I love it when a reader comes to me and says that I inspired them to become a writer themselves. That's the most satisfying and rewarding thing. Yeah,
it's like the ultimate compliment. Which one of your series would you love to see adapted to graphic novels?
Graphic novel, I would love, let's see. Ooh, that's a hard one. I think that I would love to see a Skyward graphic novel. I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah, amazing. For issued comics. And the last one is there anything you'd like to say to your readers from South America and Spain?
I would like to say, I'm sorry I haven't gotten to see you. I keep meaning, we're trying to work it out, and then COVID hit. Coming to South America was next on my list, and I had a Spain trip also back to Celsius, which is one of my favorite places. On the books, and then COVID just wiped all of that out.
That's so sad. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this interview. It has been really fun for me. I hope it was for you too.
It was.